Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources to hopefully help improve your life. I'm Stu Reed. I'm here with my inimitable co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello. It's a good
What's,
day in my household.
yeah,
Jenny just got her second shot.
say it again?
Jenny just got her second vaccine.
Wow, excellent. And Jenny is your significant other for those who maybe are listening for the first time. Wow, fantastic.
And I have a lot of information about how you can get a shot and some tech policy stuff around the world that happens to be related to COVID vaccines.
Okay, well, let's go. Let's hear it.
Okay, first, the state has extended the vaccination rules to a whole lot of people. People who work in grocery stores, anybody over 60, slews and slews. You've got to go online, though, which is one of the problems in the whole system. One of the places to go online is Ryan Center, an excellent community health group that I use. RyanCenter.org has vaccine appointments available as soon as Saturday and Monday.
That's RYAN?
CENTER.org, RyanCenter.org.
Okay.
And I'm sure you could find a way to do it, but they want you to do it online instead of on the phone. You can walk in, they have about 6 clinics if you can't figure out how to get to them online, and it's free, and it works. And I can tell you from our experience having the shot, the consequences are usually very few. Both Jenny and I were a little bit sore in our shoulders for 2 days. That's all it was, and it's working.
Which vaccine did you get?
I never even asked. They were all working.
Okay.
When I got it, it was before there was the question about the new Johnson & Johnson single shot. I've looked at the data. The Johnson & Johnson single shot is fine. Tony Fauci, who is the ultimate source on this, says it's fine and it's working. Even though there's some rumors that it doesn't work quite as well. In a large study, 20,000 people or so, about how many people do you think died from COVID over a few months?
In the 20,000 study, 0? Wow.
0.
That's impressive.
That's how well it's working.
That's impressive.
So you might get a mild case. There's the vaccines are 97% effective or something like that. They're working. Now, you do the public health here on WHCR. What are you finding out?
Well, there's still, some skepticism out in the community. The Black community in particular has had such a tortured experience with the CDC going back to, the Tuskegee experiment back, I believe it was in the 30s, where they experimented on us, giving us syphilis and didn't tell folks, and had the inoculation available and didn't give it to folks. Anyway, that skepticism has not gone away. But I was just looking at some news footage today. The governor of New York came to Harlem and got vaccinated live on TV, and also used it as an opportunity to hear from a lot of the Black supporters in Harlem for him. Anyway, long story short, the president of the Urban League came on and said a recent study showed that 67% of Black Americans are supportive of and plan to get, if they haven't already, the vaccine. So that was encouraging.
And there's really good news on that, because everything I understand says the vaccine is exceedingly safe. 99.99% or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The complications are very, very rare.
Mm-hmm.
And the data in polling has been that far fewer people are saying no now than did 3 months ago. Because a lot of people 3 months ago said, we don't know. This is new. Should we trust it? And 3 months later, 60 million odd Americans have been vaccinated, 2.3 million of them yesterday. And if there were problems going to come up from the vaccine, it would have shown by now.
Yeah. You know, speaking from my own experience, Dave, I was skeptical and cautious and, you know, wanted to see, you know, how everything would roll out. But then I spoke to my doctor, and the opportunity became available to me through my doctor and his hospital affiliation about 6 weeks ago to get a shot. And basically, my decision came down to, well, did I want to risk possibly getting COVID out here? And I know people have died. I mean, I know people who are no longer here
We all know
because of COVID. So forget about the stuff that is not serious. Forget about the stuff that it can't take you out. It can, it does, and it will. So, you know, the risk that I weighed was, okay, do I want to risk fighting COVID? And you know, I do have some health challenges underlying. I'm not a young guy, as you know. Or do I want to?
Trained is scared.
Yeah. Or do I take the risk that, you know, something might happen with the vaccine in terms of adverse reaction? I decided I'd rather deal with possible effects of the vaccine than possible effects of actually getting COVID. So that's what I did. I got the Pfizer vaccine about 6 weeks ago.
And we know a lot more than we did before. And it's still out there, and it's still strong, and 1,000 people are still dying every day in the United States. So, as I said at the beginning of the show, RyanCenter.org, RyanCenter, a good community health group down in Chelsea, can give you an appointment Saturday or Monday. I checked before we came on the air. The vaccine is finally being produced for some people. And New York State's rules have been opened up widely.
Mm-hmm.
People who work in stores, people who work in buildings and have to have contacts with the public.
Right.
That means every doorman are eligible as of last week. So this is new.
Yeah, that just happened today. Some new classes just got opened up today, I believe. Classes of people.
It may very well be, and the cutoff on age is now 60 instead of 65, and a whole load of medical conditions will take you do it. Now, how many people are dying from COVID in Brazil and India, and what should we do about it?
I don't know about India. I've read that huge amounts are dying in Brazil, really at rates that we maybe experienced early last year in March, April. And is India having the same situation?
India's rates are much better than the United States.
Okay.
I don't believe it, but everybody is confirming they're not fudging the numbers that much, which is really a surprise. And nobody really has a good answer for why it is, because obviously the Indians live very close to each other, and there's a lot of limits to the healthcare they have. And the Brazilian case is getting ugly and uglier. And it's not just that the president there is a skeptic. The numbers are horrifying. They've been going up heavily lately. Now, how many doses of the vaccine has the United States sent to Brazil?
I'd be surprised if they sent any.
I don't think we sent any.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
How many have been sent by Europe, which also has a lot of vaccine? A very small number. How many have been sent by China?
I bet millions. A lot. Yeah, what's that?
Millions of doses have already been sent to Brazil. And The Chinese with vaccine, we now have data that was published in Nature magazine, highly peer-reviewed, highly reliable. The Chinese vaccine is doing fine, as is the Russian vaccine. And China is giving the Brazilians and the Indians the right to produce it themselves.
Wow.
With no royalty.
Excellent.
So there's over 100 million Brazilians. They're just starting getting vaccinated. This was a major decision, a major international decision. China, luckily, has very few cases anymore. They locked down so hard, it was maybe horrifying. They really did have the police going door to door to make sure you were quarantined when you were supposed to quarantine. And they get a few cases and they'll shut down an entire city of 8 million people, as they have. It works. It's not gentle, and I can't tell you for sure whether it's right or wrong, but I can tell you it works. And they have the advantage now. So Sinovac is making tens of millions of doses of vaccine. Either the Times or the Washington Post had a chart of all the countries that they're shipping it to. Egypt, Algeria, Ghana. And the Times had an interesting article about a tech consequence of this. The United States went to war against Huawei for stupid reasons, and it's a stupid war because we're going to lose. China is strong enough to protect Huawei. And this did it in a most dramatic way. They didn't make it explicit, but the Brazilian foreign minister or whatever, who went to China to arrange the vaccine deal, was asked to stop by numerous Chinese companies, many of which donated. Huawei, for example, donated 100 machines that make oxygen because people are dying in Brazil because they ran out of oxygen treating the epidemic. Well, it wasn't made a quid pro quo at any public level, but they got the hint. 3 months ago, Huawei was being excluded from building the Brazilian networks because Donald Trump asked the Brazilians to go along with that. New York Times reported this week, that's changing. And Huawei and ZTE have a good shot at what will be several $1 billion worth of equipment upgrading Brazil to 5G. And frankly, if that was what it took to get vaccine for my people, I would have done that. Second one, also COVID, also tech, patents. Patents are very good on a lot of levels and incredibly destructive on others. You want a balance between encouraging companies to do things and actually getting out what's needed. In Canada, a drug company has offered to produce Canadian vaccine because they don't have enough vaccine. They say they have the technology to do it. If the Canadian government will walk in on the patents of the American and European companies and require them to license it to this Canadian company, they are ready to make millions of doses of vaccine for the Canadians. Is this right? Is this wrong? That's a long talk. But there's certainly some times where patents and monopolies go too far. And this may be the case. It turns out international law is very clear on this. In all the treaties on intellectual property, there's an exception for a government to declare a medical emergency and have compulsory licensing. South Africa has said they're going to do it. And most Africans with AIDS now get the medicines. They couldn't have paying the prices that were wanted by the Western companies. They cost very little. Relatively little. $50 to $150 a year per patient.
Mm-hmm.
Buy the generics from India.
Mm-hmm.
Years back, they persuaded the companies to allow the Indians to make generic versions of the H drugs and ship them to poor countries. Because if they didn't do that, the whole patent system was ready to be blown up.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been people willing to lie down in front of the White House, as I did once on an AIDS march, to try to get something like this. A lot of people were dying then, and there's still a lot of people dying from AIDS. So that's where the patents are going. Now, why don't you pick up one of the stories that you had, and I'll come back to some of the patent and international stories after.
Okay, well, one of the things that I was looking at, and I know you have some insight in this, is net neutrality and where that's going, particularly given new administration at the FCC, and what's going to happen with that. I read a piece that just came out, I think it was yesterday or today, that AT&T is reacting to the recent legislation in California, where California, as a state, passed their own net neutrality legislation. As our listeners may recall, the Trump administration essentially gutted the net neutrality legislation that had been passed under the Obama administration, and there was none. California instituted their own net neutrality legislation just over the last couple months. AT&T is now reacting and saying that it is going to hurt their business model in that they were giving preferential treatment to some streaming services, essentially being the way they couched it, AT&T that is, they were able to provide free streaming services with no data caps to certain customers, i.e.
And you know which those customers are.
Yeah, AT&T customers.
DirecTV and
right.
home box office
yes.
that AT&T owns.
Yes.
That's essentially it was. It was the clearest example of giving preference to your own company, your own video, as compared to Disney or Apple or YouTube and so on.
Yes.
You backed away from that this week. The California law is pretty clear. It looks like it's going to be upheld because the opposition to the California law by the federal government has been dropped by Jessica Rosenworcel at the FCC, the acting chair, who I got to listen to earlier today.
Now, who is the acting chair, Dave? I missed that two-step. Who's the acting chair now?
Oh, Jessica Rosenworcel.
Okay.
Who I've known for 20
did Pyatt
years.
leave? Did the previous chairman leave? Did the previous chairman actually leave, or he just stepped down? He left.
Yes, he stepped down the day that Biden was sworn in.
Okay.
And Jessica Rosenworcel, an incredibly hardworking, decent, smart woman, maybe is a little bit scared to do some of the things she should do, but that's Washington politics for you, is now acting chair and doing a whole lot. In fact, we should talk about the $50 subsidy that's coming and our guest on the subject and what's happening there when we have the time. So net neutrality is going to be here. Is it going to make much of a difference? Not in the short run. Because the companies like AT&T, while they may have done a few things on the edge, like favoring their own TV program, didn't abuse it terribly. They didn't turn around and take money from the Wall Street Journal to direct you to the Wall Street Journal instead of the New York Times. They haven't bothered censoring anything virtually, unlike YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, who are massively censoring. The latest I heard is that Twitter took out something like 150,000 accounts that seem to be related to QAnon.
Wow.
including one guy who I happen to know, who I think is crazy for supporting QAnon, but mostly was posting about his photography. Happened to be one of the top telecom analysts in the world, or Brett. And he got into the QAnon craziness. It's like a religion, and people go into lots of crazy religions, always have. And he was one of the ones who was shut down, even though there was nothing particularly objectionable in his Twitter feed, or nothing censorable. I thought it was pretty objectionable. It sounded it was pretty stupid, my opinion. But there's whole lots of censorship there. You had another story that you picked up from Wired about Wikipedia.
Yeah, that I find that kind of interesting. Kind of something that was maybe a little invisible or kind of under the covers if you weren't really paying attention. But apparently for, probably 2 decades now, Google and Wikipedia have been in kind of an unspoken alliance where Google has relied on information on the Wikipedia platform in providing answers to the search results. Google, of course, has grown into a multi-billion-dollar company. Wikipedia remains a nonprofit, a small level nonprofit at that. I understand under $100 million, which in the scheme of things is small, and still relies on donations and grants to survive. Well, they have just decided to launch a commercial enterprise, Wikipedia has. And it's called Wikimedia Enterprises. And they are now going to, as I understand it, charge Google and potentially others to have access to information that is somewhat curated, somewhat filtered. Previously, I think the information, as I understand it, was just kind of dumped without any real sorting or without any curating. Now, under this new commercial arrangement, they're going to more tailor the information that they make available to Google and others for a fee. And it's kind of interesting development, especially when you think that for 20 years, Google got away with murder.
Google did give them a few $1 million every now and then, but the value to Google was more. Do you think that Wikipedia is looking at what's happening to Google and Facebook in Australia and France, where they're being required to pay newspapers, and thinking that's what they're going to do?
They've got to be looking at that. I saw a piece that you sent me about in Australia in particular that Rupert Murdoch cut a deal with Facebook so that wherein Facebook has to pay Rupert Murdoch and Fox News for retransmitting news over the Facebook platform, and that's kind of interesting, isn't it, Dave? I mean,
that's pretty big.
That's pretty big. I mean, that's not generally done, as when you can quote AP News.
Well, that's what's changing, and that's why
without paying them, right?
Well, a lot of countries think it's right to pay the newspapers. Remember, newspapers always had a lot of political influence and a lot of power. Never get in a fight with anybody who buys ink by the barrelful. Is what you always said in politics. And France and Korea were the first two to impose this on Google and Facebook. And they resisted hard. Facebook said that they would pull out of Australia if Australia made them pay for the news that they use. Now, it may not be a good idea to insist that Facebook and Google pay some small amount to the newspapers. It may be, I haven't even figured it out, but it certainly is something that the Australians should be able to decide what's right for Australia and not be told by an incredibly powerful California company whether or not there should be a newspaper subsidy. A lot of people are looking for a newspaper subsidy because newspapers around the world are dying right and left.
Mm.
This hurts. They've been showing how when the coverage of state news disappears, less corruption is found in government. I guarantee you that there's just as much corruption, just not being uncovered because the reporters who might have done aren't there anymore. So it may be the right thing to subsidize local news. It certainly is not an unreasonable thing for the government of France or the government of Australia to decide. And when Facebook started threatening and shut down things like public health news sites of the government putting out health insurance, health information as part of their attempt to scare the Australians, a lot of people objected and Facebook has backed off and now they cut a deal. A lot of people I know are very unhappy that Facebook is doing this in Australia because 2/3 of the circulation of Australian newspapers is owned by Rupert Murdoch. And well, I don't think anybody listening to this needs to be told the politics of Rupert Murdoch. But the basic question of whether or not newspapers should get some of the income made from the news on the web. There's lots of different opinions, and I'm not going to try to impose mine because I'm not sure myself.
Okay. Well, let me just take a quick break here, Dave, and say that this is WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, and you listen to Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. And we're talking about the social media landscape and a recent, I won't say trend, but I suspect it's going to be replicating, where we have social media platforms paying the tech giants, or I should say the tech giants paying them for their content. Where in Australia, you now have Facebook is now paying Fox News and Rupert Murdoch to carry news on the Facebook platform. Wikimedia is just launched a new business to charge Google and others for the use of their content, curated to some degree. So this is, I suspect, a growing trend. And, you know, I don't have the answer.
Outside of the US, everybody supports this.
Yeah, you think, is it happening?
Everybody in the world thinks it's a horrible thing that there's $4 trillion worth of companies in California who don't invest around the world where they make their money and just bring it back to the United States. Speaking of the biggest of them, the $2 trillion company, Apple, is probably going to have to pay $2 on every iPhone to Huawei.
How much is that? $2 on every phone?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sure. Huawei has more patents than anyone else in 5G. They have a $15 billion a year research budget, and they're producing an awful lot. There's a reason why they are one of the 2 or 3 best in a dozen fields now. They're growing in cloud, they're in automobile control systems, and of course, in phones and in 5G. Like the other Chinese companies, they thought the patent system, or the Chinese government, until recently, thought the patent system was mostly rip-offs. And I can tell you that in phones, it's ridiculous. Qualcomm is getting $7.50 for every iPhone. Now, and Apple had no choice. These were necessary to build a 5G phone and a 4G phone, standard essential patents. They had to license them. The only question is what was reasonable. Huawei now, yesterday I was on the press conference, has decided to start enforcing their patent rights. They have more patents than Qualcomm, which is collecting $750, or Nokia, which I think is getting $3. And and you don't have the real numbers on most of these because they keep everything confidential. But those are pretty public, those numbers. Huawei said that they're going to take $2.50 or less, a third of what Qualcomm is demanding. In the Huawei at this point has more patents than Qualcomm, more or less. I am all in favor of reasonable patents. The problem is that when you have a monopoly, it can get totally out of hand, and you can ask whatever you want, and there's a court in Texas that will give it to you. And where it comes, Stu, you and I care about getting everybody connected. And I know around the world, nothing has done more to get people connected than $50 and $100 smartphones. You start adding up, say half of the $750 that Qualcomm wants, and half of the $3 that Nokia wants, and about the same from Ericsson. And then you bring in Samsung and LG and Cisco and so on. And suddenly, if all the patent rights were enforced at the level that the United States and many Europeans want them to, it would raise the cost of an inexpensive phone by 40 or 50%. Intel, that was paying a lot of royalties, actually paid somebody to do the study, and I looked at it, and that's the kind of number we're talking about, which is why I'm very disappointed that Huawei is coming in. They're being much more reasonable about it than Western companies, but even $250, it's a little bit much. And if you want all kinds of stories of the patents going back and forth, I can give you those because I have to research them lately. But I don't think that's the first thing you want to hear, is it?
No, not really. I guess I'm a little surprised, Dave, because we all know how pricey iPhones are. I'm kind of surprised that $250 would have any measurable impact on iPhones that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Of course, you got the manufacturing cost, distribution cost, and all of that. But still, I'm surprised that $2, $4, $5, $10 would have a meaningful impact on iPhones, which are almost never discounted or given away as the Android phones are.
And it doesn't have that big an effect on iPhones. Apple is paying it and is one of, I think, is the most profitable company on earth. But where I care about it is the phones that ordinary people and poor people are getting. Carlos Slim, who owns a big phone company in Latin America, was in for a meeting at the UN a few years ago. And I had the chance to ask him a question about cost and what he could do to connect the people in Mexico, where he owns the phone company. And he had an answer that was right to the point and has proven to be completely true. He said that his vendors were starting to show him phones that could connect to the internet for $50, and that phones like that were going to connect 2 billion more people. And in the last 5 years, 2.5 billion more people have been connected by mobile phones, including 500 million in India alone.
Wow.
At this point, China has more people connected to the internet than the US and Western Europe put together. And in another year or two, India will be bigger than the US and Western Europe. We don't have that much. We try to run the internet, and we still think it's ours. We're making all the money with our giant companies because they got there fast and they got to be so big, nobody could compete with them, or almost nobody. But if we care about connecting everybody in the world, You have to keep the costs down, and high royalties can really be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Granted, although not although, but maybe it is although. I think it's the monthly recurring cost that is probably a bigger hurdle for many folks than the cost of the device itself. Once you get the device, you're good.
Well, you're down
Every
to
month you got to
$3
pay.
to $10 a month now in places like India. So the monthly cost is down pretty far also.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going down fast. One of the things we've talked about here on the show is that the technology in wireless keeps getting better and better,
Mm-hmm.
which is driving the costs down about 40% a year.
Mm-hmm.
The cost per bit of wireless goes down, it halves in less than 2 years. In fact, you can look at it and you say in 4 years, the cost is going to go down 80%. And my sources on those figures are things like the top technical people at Verizon and AT&T. So the cost of the data is still too much for many people.
Mm-hmm.
But the trend on that is looking very good. And India proved it. Mukesh Ambani, richest man in India, owned oil refineries, department stores, and God knows what else. And one of the most expensive homes in the world. It's like 60 stories high in Mumbai.
A home?
Personal home.
Wow.
Home for him and his family. Yeah. Decided that he was going to build a state-of-the-art new phone network so that India would have one of the best phone networks in the world, which they now do. A year ago, they had they had more 4G than Germany as a percentage. They're around 97, 98% 4G. And price it so low that people in India can afford it. And he has proven that you can price it at $2, $3, $10 and make money. Yes, he's now profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Took 4 years, but that's now profitable. One of his competitors, Bharti, has been matching his prices and now is also growing quite rapidly. But there were 7 years ago, there were 35 million Indians connected to the internet. To now are well over 500 million because they put the prices down. And you're trying to make that happen up where you are, aren't you? To make it more affordable.
Well, I wish that would happen. I mean, I hear you talk about, this $10 a month access charge in the so-called third world. And you look here in the technological capitals of the planet here in the US, and the pricing just has not declined within anywhere near the rate that it has in Europe and in India and elsewhere. And I'm wondering whether we're going to see those savings. You talk about the price of broadband just declining, cutting in half every couple of years. But do you think consumers in the U.S. are going to see that in anywhere in the near term? To me, the prices
10 million
have been
families are
flat.
about to have, about 10 million families are about to have it happen.
Where is this?
The $50 per month subsidy has been funded $7 billion worth in the stimulus. Or was it in one of the stimulus? Yeah, I think in the latest one, $7 billion, which starting in about a month will offer a $50 a month subsidy if you're eligible for food stamps or lost your job because of COVID and so on. And they have the funding to do that for 10 million people easily. Yeah. In addition to which, anybody, well, no, because I don't know about the Brooklyn Queens cable company, but anybody in Manhattan or most of the Bronx can get a perfectly fine 50/5 cable modem service for $10 if they're in a family that qualifies for food stamps or free school lunches and so on, which is at least 40% of the kids in the New York City schools. So those programs are there now, and they're welcome. In Washington, I'm talking to people about how they're paying the phone companies $50 for something that Comcast and Spectrum are willing to sell for $10, and how much of that $50 is a ripoff.
Yeah.
But those particular programs are in place.
Well, that's good to see. We have to do a much better job in promoting those programs and making folks aware of them. I don't think the take-up rate is very high with those programs. And in regards to the $50 subsidy, that's great that that's happening. But I haven't seen all of on the supply side or the $50 going to the consumer. That's great, but on the pricing side, other than the lunch program subsidy that you mentioned, I have not seen any dramatic decreases or even any gradual decreases in pricing for
prices in the U.S. are not
consumer
going to go
broadband
down.
in the U.S.
They're not going to go down for years.
Yeah,
I can tell you why the prices are where they are for policy reasons. That would take a whole show, and I can do it. They're going to be the same. So you have to look at special programs and different ways to make it so.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republicans agreed with the Democrats that everybody needs to be connected, because even a conservative Republican does not want kids who can't go to school and aren't going to learn to read in this world. And they got the money for at least a year. If they spend it wisely, it's enough for 3 years, which is good. Now, there's another way they're making that happen that Jessica Rosenworcel is pushing through. The schools are going to be allowed to use some of the money they get to wire the schools to provide connections to some of their students. The details on that aren't set, but that decision's also good.
That would be great, because that's a lot of money that the schools get from the feds for internet, when in fact, the issue is the kids are, when they leave school, getting connected at home.
And they're willing to do. And the cost of wireless, the cost to T-Mobile to give you a decent connection, 50/5 is a good compromise at this point. You can do 50/5, lets you connect 3 kids to separate Zoom sessions for school. You can do the video conferencing for about 1 meg. So 5 meg lets you do 3 comfortably. That probably costs them, well, not probably. If they put in another 1 million kids, the cost per kid per month is somewhere between $3 and $7. Because it's really expensive to put up all the towers and build the network.
Mm.
But once you have it, adding more people to it is really cheap.
Right.
And that's why I think 50 is a total ripoff. At minimum, the government buying millions of lines should be getting a wholesale price.
Sure should.
And they're setting them up to pay retail. What else do we have here? I got the Murdoch. Oh, yeah. This is a good. Well, this is a quick one. Stu, do you remember how many wireless companies and cable companies we had when I first met you 20 years ago?
Oh man, there were so many. I used to watch that. I used to watch the top 10, the top 20. cable companies and the wireless companies. There were, you know, probably a dozen or so. There are regional ones, but the consolidation has been amazing. I don't have the
And
number on the top of my head, but I do remember when, you know, there used to be like 10 or 20 MSOs, multiple system operators in the cable industry. And there used to be a good
yeah,
handful, 6, 10 or more wireless carriers. I think that's been dwindled down significantly. You probably
and
have
now
more.
we have essentially 3 wireless carriers, and Dish may come in. We have 1.5 broadband providers in most places in the US
Mm-hmm.
because the phone companies have been upgraded. My apartment, I have only one source for a decent connection, which is Time Warner. Verizon can't give me more than 3 meg over 1 meg
Wow.
because they haven't upgraded the DSL. And I'm in Manhattan in
Wow.
an apartment building that's cheap to wire,
Mm-hmm.
but there's all that. So, as I say, we got a new commissioner. I haven't had a chance to talk to her yet. I've been avoiding Washington, but I'm going to have to go down now. Who I first met last century
At the last millennium.
when I ran a conference and she spoke at it. And I want to look her in the face and say, "You failed for 20 years, all of which she spent in government, and 12 years of which she spent on the FCC, not as chairman. When you started out, the US had great prices compared to other countries, and twice or 3 times as many companies as it has now. Government, that's a failure of government. There happens to be a big merger purging pending, which I hope Jessica is going to knock down. TracFone is actually the 4th largest, which also owns Straight Talk, which everybody gets from Walmart. It's the 4th largest phone company in the US right now. And Verizon wants to take it over. That's pending.
Mm.
And they just had a really big one go in Canada. The number 1 cable company, Rogers, just put $20 billion on the line to take over Shaw, which also and they both had competitive wireless. So they may spin off some of the wireless, but the Canadian newspapers, at least, think this deal is going to go through.
Yeah, they were number 1 or 2 in Canada, weren't they, Dave?
Yep.
Rogers and Shaw.
Yep.
Wow, and now they won.
Shaw's Wireless has had a hard time selling, but they have wireless across the country, and they could be a real competitor.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend who was working for them on that. The world, when you look at it, is so much more concentrated than 10 and 20 years ago, much less 40 or 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Income is much less equal. We know the opportunities are not what they used to be. We know all the issues of race and class, and they've been mostly getting worse, not better. And that the companies are giant is one of the reasons. One piece of good news is that the Biden administration, the people making decisions on things like antitrust, know this even better than I. Do you know Tim Wu?
You know, I know of him mostly through you. You've talked about him on the show a bunch of times, but I don't know him personally.
He just became a major technology advisor to Biden.
Oh, really?
He's a Columbia professor
Okay.
who coined the term net neutrality.
Yeah, I think that's where we heard him last together at a conference at Columbia you and I attended. We heard him speak.
Might have.
Mm-hmm.
And his latest book is called The Curse of Bigness. And it's an argument saying we actually should have some antitrust enforcement. He's now, I don't know his exact title, but it's something like senior counsel to the president for technology. something like that. He's taking a leave from Columbia University to go
Mhm.
down there. And there's a lot of people in the Biden administration who do want to make things better. Last thing before we go, let me remind people that we started talking about how you get COVID vaccinations and what technology is making that happen. And before this show, I went on the air and Ryan Center, RYAN Center.org in Manhattan had appointments for Saturday and Monday. 2.3 million people were vaccinated yesterday, and the rules are soon going to allow everybody. Go do it. I've had my 2 shots. Jenny just got her 2nd shot today. My arms were sore for 2 days. Big deal. 60 million people have been vaccinated. If there was anything seriously the matter with it, we'd know it by now. Out of time, I think.
Yeah,
What's our next interview?
Yeah, we're just about at the end. I just wanted to, you're talking about the antitrust. I just wanted to throw out there, some of our younger viewers may not know, Dave, you and I were around back in 1984 when we had one phone company for the entire country. And Judge Green came in and broke up AT&T into, I think it was 8 regional Bell operating companies, and started a whole competition and I think a technology innovation as a result of that deregulation. We got long distance companies that came out of nowhere, MCI and others, that were born as a result of that.
And the price went down from $1 a minute for a long distance call to 5 or 10 cents.
That's right. That's right. I mean,
Just,
back when we were young, a long distance call was a big deal because it's so expensive. Today, it's there's no such thing as long distance, just a call.
Today I call Hong Kong and London without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Using Skype.
Yeah. So, maybe perhaps, some wiser heads will see that it's time to do that again. These behemoths are so huge. I mean, it's going to be an incredible fight to make that happen. But, stranger things have happened. So, I'm keeping the faith. Okay. So thank you, Dave, and thank you in particular for that information on the COVID vaccines at the RyanCenter.com.
It's out there.
Yeah, we encourage folks to get vaccinated, to stay safe. You've been listening to Community and Technology with Dave Bernstein and Stu Reed. This is WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. See you next week. Good night, Dave.